Good afternoon, everyone. We'll be getting started in 1 minute, so please mute yourself. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Tompkinson. I'm a National Literacy Director with Hand to Mind. We are so grateful you're all here today. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we'll be learning about shifting from word walls to sound walls with Keegan Wilson, my colleague. So please, I will be manning the chat, so if you have any questions, please let us know. Thanks again for being with us today.
All right, well, thank you, Karen. And as you heard, we are recording this, so that is okay with everyone. I know Dr. Frieson's going to be joining us. So Karen and I are on Eastern time, so I'm going to try to be, I know that Central time, 3 o'clock, we're going to be stopping for a break. 2 o'clock Central time, 3 o'clock our time. So we will stop the recording and then restart for that next session, but I will happen to, Karen, if you can kind of keep me on a time check as well. So again, as Karen said, thank you all for joining us. And we know that this topic may be new to some people, and maybe some of you have already started implementing a sound wall. So wherever you are in your journey, we hope we can meet you in that place, and you have a lot of takeaways from today. Just want to give you a little bit of background about myself. So Karen and I have the same position with Hand to Mind. I am in the eastern region of the country, and Karen is in the central region. So she will be your contact for Hand to Mind. But I do have my email address on here. If there's anything that I say or you want me to share with you, we definitely can do that. And we don't mind at all sharing this presentation. But a lot of things I know Dr. Friesen has inputted on, already inputted on the Summer Academy drive, but if there's anything we've left off, she can add that to that drive. So a little bit about myself and where my sound wall journey began. As you see, I've had a lot of experience in special ed and intervention, and when my most recent experience in the school district, I was a dyslexic interventionist in a district, and that was where my sound wall journey began, helping teachers implement sound walls. And that happened before I had gone through LETRS. Now I've gone through the LETRS Academy, I've gone through Orton Gillingham, but I had gone through Orton Gillingham at that time and knew about sound walls, but really learned more about it as I went through LETRS and as I started reading more professional development. So my journey started for about 4 years ago, and helping teachers. And as you see, obviously now with being with Hand to Mind, I'm not in the classroom or not in the school district, but I still tutor. And so I still implement sound walls in that setting. And obviously it's not the same as in a whole group setting. So just want to give you a little bit about myself and where this all started. So this is not something, you're going to hear about. This is your first time hearing about sound walls. Don't think that this will just be a one-time training and everything and you should feel comfortable if this is your first time hearing this information. It's going to take several times and several exposures and actually doing it with your implementing with your students and implementing with the teacher guide that has been created by your district. And practice, as we know, anytime we are learning something new, having that practice really will solidify that. So these are the questions that want to make sure that are addressed today. So what are the differences between a sound wall and a word wall? What are the benefits of using a sound wall? What is included in your sound wall kit? So everybody, you will be receiving a kit from your district. What is a word wall? What is a sound wall? And what are the best practices for implementing sound walls? And what are some additional tips and resources for implementing sound walls? So I've done this presentation for a long time. I started this when I was in the district and definitely, made a lot of revisions. But for you specifically, we have made some changes because your district has created a sound wall teacher guide. And so the training today is customized, for your district and for the products that you have purchased. So we're starting with what are the differences between these two. Word walls, definitely more in our comfort zone. We've all used word walls for probably as many years as we've been teaching. Sound walls are probably the most, newer to everyone, the concept, and today may be the first time you've heard about sound walls. So just kind of highlighting the main points or the main differences in these two as a starting point. So with a word wall, we know that the words are organized by the first letter that the words start with. So the teacher creates the setup of the word wall. So depending on the teacher's style would depend on how the word wall looks. So the word wall is organized in a print to speech manner. So you're putting the entire word up there, and then you're teaching the student how to sound the word out if they don't know how to decode the word. You're just focusing on one letter, one word, right? And it's going to vary from classroom to classroom. You could all have word walls up, but they could all look very different. Sound walls are organized by the speech sounds. So they're organized by the student's point of view rather than the teacher's, because all sound walls have the same structure. And it won't look different depending on class to class. The sounds will be different because depending on what the teacher has taught. So you may have different sounds than your colleague, but the structure of the sound wall will be the same. A sound wall is from speech to print. So you begin a sound wall by teaching the sounds, and then you move to the print. Sound walls are organized in a way that students can use them independently because students are part of the process in creating and adding to the sound wall. So with the sound wall, you're also showing students that one sound can be made with many different letters. And the main focus of the sound wall is how to produce the sound. So again, with the word wall, we don't have anything about sound production or sounds. And so you're looking with the sound wall, you're showing them that one sound, under one sound, you can have multiple spelling patterns, and that also would include multiple words that could be made with those sounds. So the main benefits of the sound wall, there's many, but obviously are highlighted right here. A lot of them we just went over as comparing the word wall and sound wall. But the explicit instruction that comes with the sound wall is one of the main benefits. So you are going to use this in your tier 1 instruction. This is not going to be, you're not waiting for your students that are in intervention or in special education. You're going to implement this in your tier 1 as part of your tier 1 lesson. And that is part of what your district has created. You all made lessons to go with the sound wall, and so you have that done for you, and you will see that later in the presentation. So sound walls build orthographic mapping. So when you have word walls, you're encouraging rote memorization, and when you have a sound wall, you are showing students, you're explicitly teaching the sounds, which helps them to orthographically map those sounds into their long-term memory. So we want our students to do well on tests, and we want them to make a $100 spelling test on Friday, but on Monday, we also want to be able to spell and read those words. So if they've memorized them, a lot of times they know them long enough to make that 100, but then on Monday they can't read them, and they definitely can't spell them sometimes because of that lack of orthographic mapping. So Dr. Kilpatrick, this is an image from him. That orthographic mapping is the process we use to permanently store words into long-term memory. So when we start at the speech level, we use with the use of manipulatives, and we start there before we move into the print. And I'll show some examples of that in this presentation. That is how we build that orthographic mapping. So the sound wall has the visual representation. Sound walls include all 4 of the modalities, not just the visuals. You have the visual, you have the pictures on there. Students, when they're learning the sounds, you always have mirrors for your students. You have the auditory because students are saying the sounds, they're saying the words. You have that kinesthetic and the tactile. You have the movement where you're focusing on where the sound is made, and they can feel where the sound is made. And sound walls are not just for reading, they're also for spelling. So you have that decoding and encoding with the sound walls. Again, you're showing your student that one sound can be represented by several different graphics. So when you think about the one that always comes to my mind is the sound. So when you think of you're going, you're teaching your students that for that sound, you're going to teach them that F, the grapheme F is associated with that sound. You've got GH associated with that sound, and you have PH associated with that sound. So on a sound wall, you're going to have all those different graphemes, but you are going to place them on the sound wall as you explicitly teach them. So that explicit instruction is a big part of sound wall instruction as well. But again, it's not in isolation, it's part of that tier 1 instruction. So this, goes, as I just said, the modalities, the multimodal instruction, and how the brain learns to read. This all, comes together right here in this image this image actually is from Dr. Moats. And if you've ever seen this image before, she says, with this image, reading really is rocket science. So if we see all the parts of the brain and what they're responsible for, dyslexic learners, especially the frontal part of their brain is overly stimulated, and the parietal and occipital parts of their brains are not activated until we provide explicit, systematic, and multimodal instruction. So if you think of learners in your class, students in your class that you just have not been able to get things to stick. Whatever it was you were teaching, it just would not stick with them. And you've tried another modality, and then they were able to learn whatever the topic was. And you think of students that you've not been able to get them to move, and especially think about with reading, and you haven't tried other things with them, and they continue to be stagnant, right? So always bringing in another modality. Sometimes those students that are stagnant, you can get them to get it with that, just additional modality added to that instruction. And if you're looking for some good summertime reading, this book right here, I think that this is the first time when I heard Dr. Dahan speak. He's hard to understand because he's from France, but how he speaks about the brain, it's very detailed, obviously, but it really was like an aha moment for me. So this book obviously is a very deep read, but it's very eye-opening to what the brain is responsible for, and especially when it comes to reading. So if you're looking for something to add to your professional development, this is a good one. So in your kit that you're going to get, these are the products that you will receive. So your district did customize the teacher guide. So you are going to receive the Soundwall kit with a customized teacher guide in there with lessons. So the Soundwall kit, I'm going to show you the items in it. That is what everybody will receive, that with a customized guide with lessons that were created by your district. So that will be in there as well. You'll also have a mirror, a set of mirrors for your students, and then you'll also receive the 3D sound and phonics cards, which I will show you, and you'll see why those are so important and essential for Soundwall instruction. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to move to my DocuCam so I can actually show you what you're going to be receiving. So as I'm going through this presentation, if you can, as you see things I'm going to use, then you'll be able to say, oh, well, I'm actually going to have that. So it'll make more sense to you. So the Soundwall card set that you're going to receive, I want to show you the components of that. So you'll have 44 of the phoneme cards of the sounds, 45 of the graphing cards, and then you're going to have 80 more of the spelling cards with the headers, the blank, you're going to have write on, wipe off cards, and then the teacher guide. So everything you need for the Soundwall is included in this kit. Everything comes on rings. So you're going to notice as we go through these products that things are color coded. So you'll notice that right away. So all the consonants are going to be blue. So these are all the the graphing card. So you have the keyword and then the graphing associated, or the word associated with the keyword that's highlighting the sound. So this is obviously for book, right? So you have all those cards together, and then you have all the phoneme cards with the mouth position cards here. So you're going to have the phoneme and mouth position connected as you see the color coding. So for consonants, they're going to be blue, and you see in the corner it has the sound associated with that manner of articulation, the picture of the mouth with the phoneme. You also will have additional graphing spelling cards. So again, you have that color coordination where you see all the consonants blue there, and then you have two of those, two sets of those graphing spelling cards. And then you also will have all the labels that you need for the sound wall. So again, you don't have to, everything is done for you. So you even have all the labels, consonant charts and everything, and we'll go through the labels as we go through this presentation. And then the other part, you're going to have the dry erase cards that come in this kit. And so these can be used for you to add words that you need that don't come in the kit. Obviously, like I said, they're dry erase. And then you'll have your customized sound wall, and then you'll also have the one that comes with it from Hand to Mind. You probably won't use this very much because the one that was created by your district has everything that you need in there. You also are going to receive a mirror, and then the 3D sound and phonics cards. You're going to receive a box of these because these are teacher-led cards. I'm going to show you these. So the 3D sound and phonics cards, I'm going to show you one example of one. So this is obviously for the diagraph, right? So if you notice when I move this card, the 3D picture over here on the right-hand side, and if you also notice the dot in the right-hand corner. So there's a green and red dot. The green is the mouth position when you begin the sound, and then the red is the mouth position when you complete the sound. So it's kind of hard to, I think you can see it slightly. So obviously the kids love this, and this is the student-facing part of the card. But the most important part of this card is that you, on the back of it, you have how to produce the sound, and it's scripted. So as you're holding your mirror, as your students are holding their mirror, you are reading this to your student. So these cards are invaluable unless you're a speech therapist. This is the part that, if you're an educator or interventionist, anything, where you haven't gone to school for speech therapist, I definitely was never trained on how to teach sound production. So this is great right here, and this can be used, like I said, as your student holds the mirrors. And you'll also notice, so for the sound, that keyword, you're also going in the sound wall, you're going to see that consistency. So when on the 3D sound and phonics card, again, the box of these cards, you're going to have the same keyword. So as your students see this, they're also going to see that same picture on the sound wall itself. So the person that they see may be different. So in here, obviously, this is African American male. Here you have a Caucasian female. So the mouth position picture will be different, but the key word, so as they think of that picture or they visualize that picture, that sound comes to mind. So those are the products that you will have, and I will be referring to those throughout the presentation today. So just wanted to let you know, because if you're watching this and you're like, well, we don't have any of this, well, you will. And everything I'm using, most everything I'm using in here are products that you will have. And if there's any questions,
Keegan, can I interrupt you?
Yes.
This is Stacy Letcher, and I have Monica Camacho with me. We're actually on the writing team that created the Soundwall implementation guide specific to North Kansas City. And I just wanted to mention a couple things regarding what the teachers are going to get. I put a couple in the chat, but I think only a few people have seen it. The district is providing for all of the kindergarten teachers in their classrooms mirrors for the students. So all the kindergarten teachers will be receiving those, excuse me. In regards to the Soundwall cart set that we're getting from you all, some of the anchor words that Hand to Mind uses are not the same anchor words that we're using as a district. So we are also creating new pictures to cover up the Hand to Mind anchor word. And then we're also getting locks to cover the sounds so that when you introduce and teach the new sound, you can unlock the sound on the sound wall. Yeah,
Yes.
and then when we teach the sound wall in our implementation guide, we're only teaching the spelling that's specific to kindergarten. We're not adding like the additional spellings that word could have. That will come later when our reading foundation units, when they cover the new sound, then you'll refer back to the sound wall guide to kindergarten and that placement on the sound wall. Did I forget anything?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
You did great.
Does that make sense?
No, thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
please interject. I don't thank you for saying you were on here because I do have, was gonna mention, Dr. Prieston had told me some things to mention, but having you speak on whatever, if y'all see anything, a time where y'all need to interject, please do.
Yeah.
Some of y'all
And
work
if anybody
hard.
has a question, we're here for that. Lisa had contacted both of us and just let her know that she would be joining us a little bit later. And if anybody had any questions we can, if it's district specific, we can answer those. So
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, so this question is one that we will not be spending a lot of time on because I've already covered this and this is one, that we are very comfortable with. So what is a word wall? Obviously, it's arranged by 26 letters and it's arranged by the first letter of the word. So it looks different depending on the classroom, the way the teacher, wants it arranged. So this section is where I show an example actually from one of my own children's word wall folders that he brought home last year. When he brought this home, it was like like an aha moment for me because I'm always immersed in Soundwall implementation and instruction. And then when I actually saw this like file folder word wall that obviously my son, who was first grader at the time, had been using every day, I was like, oh wow. So I'm going to share this with you. And as I'm sharing this with you, I want you to listen. We're only going to look at the letter A. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to read those words. And I want you, as I'm reading them, I want you to think about how many initial sounds you hear under that letter A. Okay, so I'm only under letter A. So and, about, after, again, are, ask, all, am, almost, already, also, always, animal, any, and add. So you think about your students that are trying to decode those words on a word wall, right? All those different sounds. So there's actually, depending on your curriculum and how you teach, there could be 5 different initial sounds because all these, the AL, that welded sound, if you teach that as like a welded sound, then you would have a special category on the sound wall. But you have any, which is short E, you have 2 schwas, about, again, a lot of short A, obviously, and then you have R. But if your student is coming up to you and they are trying to find about on a word wall, where are you, if they're looking at the word wall about, they're going to be looking over here, right? About, again. One I want you to really think about is on the word wall, if a student was looking for the word phone, they're looking on the word wall for the word phone. Where are they going to go? Right? If they can decode that initial sound, right? Phone. On the sound wall for phone, they would be going under here because you would have, if you had explicitly taught that PH spelling pattern, if you were there in your scope and sequence, then you would have it on here. But if you hadn't taught that, then this would be a time that you could explicitly teach that, because you will run into words, obviously, that you haven't explicitly taught yet. Think about the word children, children, that digraph. Where are they going to go? They're going to see it right here, right? Children. But then where the sound, the word think, any of the digraphs, where students going to go on the word wall. So it's just a time to kind of think about that, when students are looking for words, especially if they can decode that initial sound in the word, so they know enough about decoding the word to hear that initial sound, and they're going to the word wall and they can't find it, right? So on a sound wall, they hear that initial sound, they go to that sound on the sound wall, and they see all the different ways to spell that word. So that's definitely, a big difference. So let's look at, speaking in digraphs and initial sounds. So on a word wall, if you had these words, Thomas, they, that, there, together, this, and toy. And you have those words. How many different sounds do you hear? So if you're on a sound, if you were using a sound wall, you would have that, and then you have the, right, that digraph. So again, sometimes, it's not a lot of different sounds that, but it's definitely more than one that you have in there, especially when you're including those digraphs. So you just have to think about this, and all that, especially, if you've been using a word wall, we just think, oh, well, our students should be able to read this. We've explicitly taught this. But for decoding, when they're sounding out, when they're segmenting those sounds and they're going up to a word wall, you just have to think about where will they go, right? And the students that can decode, these tools don't come, these are not tools that these students are going to use in the same way for our students that struggle, right? So our students that struggle, sometimes they can only decode that initial sound, and they depend on that. And so with the sound wall, if they know that initial sound, it can get them to, the rest of the word. With a word wall, they just have that initial letter is what they're focusing on. So as I mentioned earlier, speech to print, that is the foundation for sound walls, because we are teaching, the first step in sound wall instruction is we are teaching our students how to produce the sound. They are using a mirror. They're not seeing any words, so they don't see the graphemes until we've explicitly taught how to produce it and how to manipulate the sounds. We make sure that they hear how many sounds are in the word before we even give them a chance at the phonics level. So these quotes by Dr. Moats just really, stand out to me, in her book, Speech to Print, is really the deep dive, or what, for me, it was the deep dive in my sound wall journey. So I learned a lot about it in volume 1 of Letters, but then this was my next step. This book, if you are wanting to implement, or you are wanting to know more and you haven't gone through Letters, even if you've gone through Letters, it's just a good next step. I know a lot of districts or a lot of schools actually are using this as a book study within, the building, to kind of get them to where they need to be with sound wall instruction. So I'm going to read these 2 quotes from Dr. Moats and then show you what does speech to print look like, and then how does that go together with the sound wall instruction. So decoding print is possible only if the reader can map print to speech efficiently. Therefore, the elements of speech must be clearly and consciously identified in the reader's mind. Without awareness of the speech sounds that letters represent, one cannot match letters to sounds and read unfamiliar words. So when I was tutoring a student yesterday, the student, I was giving her a high frequency word check. She could read every single word that I was giving her. When I went to the encoding, probably half of those words she couldn't spell. And the spelling she was giving me for those words did not even make sense. But reading, she's so fluent, flying, she's automatic, flying through them. But when it got down to the encoding, it did not transfer. So that shows me that this student has memorized the words, and she was probably taught print to speech instead of speech to print. And so what am I doing with that student? Exactly what I'm going to show you right now. So when we think of speech to print, we think of using, manipulatives at the phonemic awareness level. So when we say the word cat, we want to make sure the student hears the 3 sounds. So cat, right? They're using manipulatives. Cat. They're pressing them. Cat. They're moving them. They're having a chance to move them up. Right, as many things as many opportunities as we can at that manipulative level, and then we can show them that correspondence, right? That speech to print correspondence instead of starting here. And once we realize when like that student yesterday, they can read this, they can't spell it, so I need to go back to this, right? Because I need to start here. So I can make sure that they know that correspondence, that speech to print correspondence, right? So this is what it looks like in the classroom. Obviously, there's many different ways, many different manipulatives that you can use in different ways, but that all encourages that orthographic mapping that I was talking about at the beginning for the goal of the long-term retention. So speech to print is, like I said, the whole foundation for what we're talking about today as well. So things to consider. This is a really good document. The Massachusetts Education State Department is where I found this resource from. And this is just a good tool to use, especially as a grade level. And as a school, when you're beginning this journey, your journey here, and being consistent, making sure identifying the space for the sound wall, the materials, obviously your district has provided those, choosing how the sound wall will be organized and displayed. I'm going to show you pictures in this presentation where I use a science board for display. Obviously, there's many different ways you can display a sound wall. As was just shared with you about the locks, devising a plan for revealing new sounds. So I'm not very cutesy. I love cutesy, but I'm not good at cutesy. So when I am revealing a new sound, I use a lot of sticky notes. So I cover things up, but the locks are very cute, and kindergarten especially, they will appreciate all that, the cutesy. So then establishing a time in the day to interact with the sound wall. Obviously, it's part of that tier 1 instruction. But, a lot of people are, using it in more than just that space. They're, in their morning meeting, they're going to talk about the sound of the day. They're going ahead, and introducing it there. And then obviously when they get to their literacy block, then they're doing more of that. But just, again, this is just a good kind of planning tool and good discussion to get everybody on the same page, because that is important, because as you'll see throughout this presentation, if students in kindergarten or first grade have never seen a sound wall, if they didn't see one in kindergarten, then it's going to be it's going to be harder for them and harder for the teacher, because there are a lot of sounds that in kindergarten were taught that the first grade teacher is going to have to expose them to for the first time, as far as how to produce the sound, the manner of articulation for that sound. So when your school's on the same page, it helps you and the students. So you'll see that, in your data, especially too, and also you'll just see that as far as the ease of how much review you have to have. So it's just, again, I want to just offer that as a good planning, and that's just a really good resource. This is another really good resource right here. So what is a sound wall? This resource is actually from the Louisiana State Department, this QR code. So Louisiana is very far along in their science of reading journey. This document is like a 45-page document that has a lot of resources, a lot of research-based resources. Dr. Moats is cited in it a lot. But the reason why I use this picture, so this picture came from that website. So I use this picture for several reasons. This sound wall is in progress, which in kindergarten, your sound wall is going to be in progress for sure. Because in kindergarten, you're the first step, right? You're the first, then the sounds are coming to you, and in pre-K, they may have had some sound wall instruction, but you're starting the sound wall. Like you're the first, especially now with this implementation this year, your sound wall is either going to be empty when they walk in the first day of school, or you're going to have it up with the locks covering everything. But the students on the first day should not see any sounds because you haven't taught them anything. So this is a sound wall showing you in the green, it has the consonants, and in the red, it has the vowel valley. So you need to have two distinct spaces. This is not how I would not have them right beside each other like this, but I would have them, I would not have them on top of each other. I would have them side by side. So I when I make them, I have them on two different science boards because the size of our cards are small enough that science boards work. I was just in a district last week. They had them on two different bulletin boards. One was to the left of the door and one was to the right of the classroom door. And that worked really well with smaller bulletin boards, but it needs to be distinction for your students to see the consonant chart and for them to see the vowel vowel. So what is the sound wall up? I think I've said a lot about it already, but the main thing that I want you to notice about this sound wall is there's authentic pictures, which the sound wall that you're purchasing from Hand to Mind includes as well. So any student, no matter their ethnicity, can look up at the sound wall and see a picture of a mouth that represents them, right? So we have male and female, we have all ethnicities. So it's very hard, you know, for a student to think about their mouth if they look up there and see cartoon characters. So that the authentic pictures are very important. You'll also see that, you know, on the sound wall, you have the mouth position, then you have the phoneme, then you start building the grapheme representation. Our sound wall obviously has that sound and mouth position picture together. But it's the steps that we will talk about later in this presentation that matter on how you add it up there. So a sound wall, as I've said, you're showing students that one sound can be represented by several different graphemes. So that's one of the, you know, the main points of the sound wall is that we're teaching them a sound, but we're teaching them, and it may not be in kindergarten, it may be in kindergarten that they learn the initial sound, but then in first grade, they learn several other ways to spell that sound. And in second grade, they learn more ways to spell that sound. So again, that's why it's a progression. In kindergarten, you're not going to even put up all the parts of your sound because you aren't going to be teaching all the parts. And as we look at each part more in depth, you'll see that. Again, this is part of your tier 1 instruction. I had a speech therapist in one of my sessions a couple of weeks ago. It was very intimidating. Honestly, I didn't know until the end, and I was glad. But she told me, she said it's so encouraging to see, you know, teachers, interventionists doing this in the classroom. She said, we have been the only ones for so long. And she agreed, you know, the back of our 3D cards and the script, she's like, I asked her, I said, do you have any feedback on those? And she said, no, I think these are great. Obviously, there are some students that are still going to need speech therapy. A sound wall is not going to keep students from qualifying for speech therapy, but what it is going to do, the students that have been producing sounds incorrectly and that have been taught the sounds incorrectly initially, either by a preschool teacher or a parent, you are going to correct that, because that, if they don't correct that sound, that could lead to a speech referral. So again, I'm very clear on that. It's not that these are replacing the speech therapist, but sometimes we're cleaning up sounds or we are correcting sounds that later on, if not corrected, would end up being a referral. Maybe, you know, just a quick referral where it's like they clean the sounds up. But again, this is that tier 1 instruction piece. And even, you know, now when I'm tutoring students, they can be 3rd or 4th graders. And sometimes I have to go back and just clean up specific sounds. I see it in their spelling that they're substituting short vowels. So I go back, I bring back, I use the cards, I pull out the short vowels, I get all the short vowel cards and go pull out a mirror and start there when I see they're making consistent errors in their spelling. So sound wall instruction is not just for that decoding, it's also for that, you know, encoding as well. So the parts of the sound wall. So this is exactly what you're going to have. This is the Hand to Mind consonant chart. So as I was showing you earlier in the bag, all the labels that you see in the blue, you're going to be receiving. So everything on here, you're going to be receiving, and there's not anything you're looking at, you're gonna have to laminate or cut or do anything with. It's all going to come in your, SoundWall guide.
I just want to jump in real quick. We have added just by, so for the ones that have 2 sounds, we have created one. So if you do want a section that has 2 sounds, like X and Q have those, so they just have the, where you reference the 2 sounds. So if you do want to add that when you get to that part of the lessons with those letters, since we're teaching the letters with their corresponding sounds, you can add that, and that will be in Canvas, but everything else will come in your guide. So if you do, it's very minimal what you have to add, but it's already created for you. You do just have to print that part out. So I just want to
I'm glad you said that, Dr. Friesen, because yes, X and Q are not on that SoundWall, but they are in the 3D sound and phonics cards. So they are not on the SoundWall because they are made, the sound is made with 2 sounds, right? The X is X. And so on the SoundWall, like Dr. Friesen said, you have the option to add that. But as far as how to produce the sound, you will have that. So you have the card, the 3D card for how to teach your students how to produce the sound. So you don't see it on there, but you do have the instructional tools for for that sound production. Thank you for saying that. I had those set to the side to add that, but I didn't realize y'all had added that on campus. Y'all are taken care of in North Kansas City.
Yes, we're going to add, there's resources in Canvas already in the Reading Foundations course that you can add the section. I would add, just as Keegan had shared, once you teach it. So it's really later on in our sequence in kindergarten, after you've taught a lot of these sounds, but you can add, so you'll have already taught those individual sounds, and then we'll add a section that has kind of those blue rectangles that say 2 sounds, and you can add it there. So you can teach it as it's 2 sounds, but they can go to that to know, oh, it actually makes those 2 sounds.
Thank you. So the consonant chart, obviously you're going to only add what you teach. So there are going to be some of the consonant, and I don't know because I haven't looked. I don't know exactly which ones you will have on your consonant chart. It'll apply more to the vowel valley. But the order, so the order that you see these in under the categories, like all the stop sounds, depending on how your scope and sequence, or when your scope and sequence introduce them, will depend on what order you put them in these categories. So the stop sounds, it's going to be these 6 sounds that you are going to have under the stop section. But depending on your scope and sequence will depend on which ones you have for the order you have the stop sounds. Same as the liquids. Same for all the sounds. So that is going to be dependent how you place them will be dependent on when you teach them. So again, following that scope and sequence for adding it, and we'll talk about, there's a whole section on that. So I'll elaborate more on that using that scope to add the sounds up here. But does it matter if your students know what the label or the categories are? It does. Because there's a reason that these sounds are under the categories. So all the stop sounds are produced in the same way. All the liquids, the nasals, the affricates, the glides, the fricatives, they're produced, where they're produced and how they're produced are the reason that they're under those categories. So is it important that your students understand it? It's definitely important, and it's important in the production. And it's also, it can correct errors in how your students are producing. Obviously in kindergarten, the affricates, fricatives, those are big words, and those are harder to explain to them, but stops and nasals and liquids and glides those are easier to explain. And there's a lot of ways, like with the stops, and if you want to try this now, or you may have seen this before, but if you produce, and I know there's actions and y'all have added a lot of things for these sounds, but for all of those sounds, like if you were to put your hand, if your students were to put their hand in front of them and they are to say any of those stop sounds, they're just going to feel a burst of air. So like it's just a quick burst. You can even hold a Kleenex up and have them see the Kleenex, just your napkin, just see that burst of air. The nasals, they're all produced in your nasals. So we're gonna look at that here. So this explains how the sound is produced. Obviously this for kindergarten, you know, this is kind of higher level for some of them, like I said, those fricatives and affricates. But where the sounds are produced, the nasals, if they close, if your students, and obviously they'll love this, if they close their nasals, and we can try this, if you close your nasals, you cannot produce, I cannot produce those 3 phonemes that fall under that category. So is it important that they understand the categories? Yes, because this is part of the production and how it's produced. And for them, again, they could be producing it incorrectly because they're not producing it in the right place. Stacey, did you want to say something? Saw you.
I did. I just wanted to let teachers know that in their sound wall implementation guides, there is a piece that shows each of these categories, and we created actions to go with them to help students to remember each of the different categories.
I think I have that pulled up. I could share that. I could share that. I didn't have it. Let's see here. It is right here. I have that. I can show you what Stacey's referring to, just in case you haven't had a chance to look at this yet. So this is the section right here with the stops. So the action, and then so this action section is this is the addition. It's a great one. It's just Hand in Mind didn't have this. So this is one of the customized parts that you all added to this. So those categories not only have a description, but also the action. So to bring that multimodal in, so your students are actually doing a movement with that action as well. So thank you for that, Stacey. And if there's anything, Dr. Prieston, Stacey, please, you know, and I know you will, Dr. Prieston, you'll let me know if there's anything.
You're doing a great job.
I will, thank you. So again, this is, you know, sometimes the words that, you know, fricatives and affricates are little intimidating, but glides and liquids, like the glides, obviously those sounds, they glide into a vowel. Liquids kind of roll around in your mouth when you're producing them. The top 2 stops and nasals are the easiest to explain because there's, you know, multimodal involved in that. They can actually feel when they produce that sound, they can feel the burst of air. The nasals, they can stop their nasals and see how you can't produce it. And they can also, as they're producing it, feel, you know, where the sound is being produced. So those 2, the fricatives and affricates, they're harder. For me, even as an adult, that one is harder to understand. And with your mirror, you can see, you know, as your students are looking into the mirror, they can see a lot of this taking place too, where the sound is happening and, you know, where air is coming from. So again, that's why the mirror is a vital part of all this instruction as well. So the Vowel Valley, this is definitely the place where you probably will, I know for sure, you will not be teaching all of the sounds that you see on this Vowel Valley. So when you go into 1st grade, into 2nd grade, you will see complete, especially 2nd grade, you'll see complete vowel valleys because they will have explicitly taught all the sounds. If you're like me though, I'm very OCD. So as I am preparing sound walls, I go ahead, I use Velcro. So I go ahead and build this whole skeleton, even if I'm not going to put up every part, because I want to make sure I have space for everything on the sound wall. So I go ahead and I have, this is like my outline, and I build from this, even though if I'm not going to include everything on here in the rest of the present, there's a part of the presentation where I'll show you from kindergarten to 2nd grade what the progression looks like of a consonant chart in a vowel valley. But don't worry, you're not going to have to worry about portions of what you see right here. But the reason the vowel valley, the order of the phonemes on the vowel valley, if you notice, starting with long E, you see that there the student has a smile, And as you go down the vowel valley, the mouth starts rounding, the short O, the student has pretty much a perfect rounded, mouth. And then as you start back up the vowel valley, it starts to open up. And then, you have, as you go into long U, you see the more of the like pursed mouth position as well. So the reason the vowels are where they are in that vowel valley is because of the production, how those sounds are produced, and the mouth position, where, what is going on in mouth position, manner articulation. So your skeleton, even if you don't have all of these, if you're not going to be teaching all of these, you may have gaps, and that's okay. But you need to make sure that you have the sounds in this order, even if, like I said, even if you aren't going to be teaching some, and the gaps will be there, and it's okay. If you are OCD and you need to see completion, go up to 2nd grade. And you can see a whole, you see the entire vowel valley. But I do want to talk a little bit about the middle of the vowel valley, the schwa. So as you can hear, I'm very Southern, and I didn't even learn about schwa until I went through Orton Gillingham, but I had been using or teaching schwa to all my students, especially when I was teaching consonants. So I don't think probably anybody listening to me has an accent like I do, but going back to the consonants, when I would teach the stop sounds to students, I would say p and b and t instead of p, t. So before I learned to clean up my sounds and how to produce sounds, that is how I was teaching those sounds to my students. And what did that mean? If I was teaching them to decode that way, their encoding also looked that way. So I do want to talk about schwa because it's definitely the most common vowel sound, but it's definitely the most undertaught. I feel like no matter where I go in the country, it's just a handful of people that are teaching it. Depending on what curriculum you use and your trainings, definitely depends on your knowledge of schwa. But again, I taught for many years and didn't know about it. But I have been teaching it, just inadvertently, not knowing what it was because of my accent and incorrectly teaching those phonemes. And this is what in preschool, I think a lot of times students are taught the sounds incorrectly. And when we're talking about the manner of articulation, they come to you, especially in kindergarten, having some sounds, but a lot of incorrect sounds, because I hear a lot of preschool teachers at conferences, and they'll, come to our booth and see manipulatives, and they'll say, oh, look at this, but, and they start pressing things, and I hear their production of sounds. So a lot of times, it's obviously your responsibility to clean that up, unfortunately. So this resource right here from Really Great Reading is one that I love to show. The super schwa. So the sound for schwa is that right? I guess I can help you. And you may not even teach this in kindergarten. Can I ask that question? Is it taught in kindergarten?
We do not have an explicit lesson for schwa, excuse me. But when we teach our high frequency words, and we have words that are considered a heart word, like the word they'll introduce that language schwa to explain why E is making that sound instead of eh. So we do have it within our units, but not explicitly taught.
Okay. Well, I do want to show y'all this cute little schwa doll. And this is a great resource, the Not So Lazy schwa, for when you're introducing schwa. So I just want to show you this, especially it's a great read aloud to introduce schwa and what that sound does to words. So I want to just show that to you. So on our sound wall, you will see that we just have a keyword for schwa. So schwa is in the center of the vowel valley. We have the label for it. Obviously, it's that upside down E. And like I said, it's the most, not vowel sound, but the most common sound in English language. And it's that unstressed syllable in a multisyllabic word. So on the vowel valley, let me go back to the right there on the vowel valley. Schwa, like I said, you will have the label and you will have the keyword. So the keyword in here is banana. But this is another reason why we've included the dry erase cards, because as you're, Stacey said, if you're, explicitly teaching those heart words and one has schwa, you can add those, or if you were to do a read aloud and find words with schwa, or if your students were to come across a word with schwa and you haven't taught it and you want an opportunity to explicitly teach that word, then you can add words with schwa to these cards, because you will just have banana. And as you see, in banana has two schwas, that nan, the two A's, the two grapheme A's on there. So again, where is the schwa? I want to point out that schwa definitely is dialect and accent dependent. So I may say the word and you definitely hear the schwa. You may say it and you may not hear it. And I definitely have that happen a lot, especially if I'm in a different part of the country. I'll say it, they're like, yes, I hear it when you say it, but they say it, I do not hear it. And if your students are coming from other places, then, other parts of the country, if they're saying it and you don't hear it, or vice versa, we definitely need to recognize their dialect and not try to change that. So having that discussion is important. So in the word and, you hear that schwa as the grapheme A. Elephant, that E is the grapheme family, that I. And again, explicitly teaching schwa with all the vowels of the grapheme. So any vowel can be represented, any schwa can be represented by any vowel as the grapheme. So you'll see here, I've got examples of schwa represented by all the vowel graphemes. I do want to, like in the word according, going back to the word wall and going, just an example that was real life to me. My son, the son that had this word wall folder, he last year had spelled according with a U. And it was in one of his writings. I mean, it wasn't counted off, but his teacher circled it and he hadn't learned about schwa, and I knew that. And so it was a good time to discuss schwa with him, because he's like, Mom, that's short U. I'm like, well, that's actually a schwa. So you hear that in the beginning of a lot of words, but obviously that multisyllabic words, which in kindergarten you're not necessarily focusing on or teaching, but there'll be times where you run into a word where you may have to give that explicit instruction. And that, again, that schwa, the not so lazy schwa, is just a great one. It even helped me as an adult understand schwa in a different light. So building the sound wall as you explicitly teach the sound. I think this is probably one of the most, this is a misconception that even when people have had a lot of training in science reading, whether it's letters or there's so many different trainings out there, they still think that you take this bag and you put the whole thing up. If you have ever been on any of, the websites, any of the teacher pages, and you see before school starts, we'll start seeing them soon, where people are posting pictures of their classroom and they have an entire sound wall up, and they haven't had one student come in the classroom, right? With all the sounds exposed. When I see that, I cringe, but this is something that no matter what trainings people have had, this sometimes is not understood. So you're going to build as you teach, and I'm going to show you pictures, but I'm also, before I show the pictures, I am going to be referring to the UFLY scope and sequence, the University of Florida scope and sequence. So I'm going to share this with you just for a second, and I don't want this to be a distraction if you don't use it or you haven't heard of this. The reason why I share this specific scope and sequence, obviously there's many out there, but this one is free online, and a lot of districts, a lot of schools don't have a scope and sequence, so they need a starting point. And I like to show free resources, so this happens to be free, but I'm going to use this to show you how to explicitly build some specific sounds. Again, referring to this scope and sequence. So, and then I have pictures to show you where I have used this scope and sequence to build the pictures. So I'm gonna share. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna mention a couple things. On our sound walls, the reason why we're having the locks is so that we can go ahead and put our entire sound wall up, and then they'll have the lock on there. So teachers will unlock it when they're ready to teach it rather than build as they go. And then the other thing we were gonna say. Forgot what it
The
was.
sequence.
Oh, the sequence. So when we teach their sound implementation guide, their sound wall implementation guide, the letter sequence, it does follow UFly. I just wanted to let them know that because our teachers don't have access to the UFly book, but we did follow that scope and sequence.
Thank you for saying that. Susan. Yes, thank you. I was gonna say anything you can add like that. Thank you. Yeah, so again, I don't want this scope and sequence to be a distraction. I just want you to think of your scope and sequence, whatever it is. I know that, you have the lessons are built around the scope and sequence, so you don't have to worry about this part, but what I'm gonna show you is just a concept of building to the scope and sequence. So, and also because in kindergarten, you're gonna have some pieces of the sound wall, like your bag, you're not, even at the end of the kindergarten year, you're gonna have pieces in that sound wall that you haven't pulled out, and it's okay. It's actually, if you were to use them all, that would be a concern. So you should have, a bag with pieces left in it. So let's look at this. I'm gonna show you with two specific sounds. So when I say we're using our scope and sequence to build, I'm going to show you with this sound right here. I'm going to start with this one, the sound. So if you look at this scope and sequence, the first time our students are going to, we're going to explicitly teach the sound is in lesson 2 of UFly. So it's going to be in that lesson that my students have their mirrors, right? And I'm using the 3D sound and phonics cards that you're going to receive. And I am reading the script on the back as my students hold their mirrors, right? So I'm teaching my students the manner of articulation for how to produce the sound, right? I'm going to do that at the beginning of this lesson. So after I have explicitly taught how to produce the sound to my students, they have, so they've learned the manner of articulation, then I'm going to be adding that to my sound wall. In this lesson, I'm also teaching my students that for that sound, the grapheme associated is the letter M, right? So on my sound wall, I'm going to be adding that keyword, which is milk. And in that word milk, that my students are going to see that grapheme for this sound. Okay. But in the sound wall, you're also going to have another combination, another grapheme for that sound. Okay. Well, in my scope and sequence, I am not teaching that sound until lesson 98. That's in first grade. So, because kindergarten ends about, I think it's right here, lesson 68. So kindergarten is only responsible for this, right? So in kindergarten on my sound wall, I'm only going to have what I have explicitly taught, which is going to be how to produce the sound, the manner of articulation, that is the manner of articulation for that phoneme, and the key word and the grapheme for that sound. So that's all I would have on my sound. But then in first grade, they're going to be responsible for teaching that grapheme for that sound. So this part in kindergarten is just going to go in my back. I'm not going to use this, right? It's just going to stay in the back. The same thing you're going to have the same thing and you're going to have it happen for a lot of the sounds, but I'm just going to show you for the sound, right? So in lesson 7 of UFly is where I'm first going to introduce that sound. I have got in the sound wall, I'm going to have 3 other pieces for that sound. And lesson 7 is where I'm going to explicitly teach that for this sound, I'm going to introduce the grapheme F and the keyword grapheme. Then I'm also going to show in lesson 42, which is still going to be in kindergarten, that I'm going to teach that floss rule. Now, this is an example. Hand to Mind does not have, in the sound wall, we do not have a grapheme card with a word with the floss rule. So I'm going to use one of my cards and add a word. I'm going to add a word that would fit lesson 42, right? Because hand of mine we didn't produce a card with that. But then I have two other graphings, right? I have the pH and the GH. In lesson 50, I will add the pH to my sound wall. But then this is not going to be taught until first grade, the GH. So I would put this in my bag. So on my sound wall in kindergarten, the pieces for that would be the manner of articulation, the phoneme, the keyword, that grapheme, and then I added a word, right? Because I've explicitly taught this word in that UFLA lesson. And then I've also got the pH, the grapheme's pH. So in kindergarten, that's what it's going to look like. But what I'm trying to show you there is that there's going to be pieces I'm just going to put back in the back, right? And so you're going to expect that in kindergarten, you're going to have some pieces that you may not need. And as you saw me add that word bud, you can also add words that are explicitly coming from your lessons that we may not, because we're a supplemental company. And so we may not have created a word that fits all the graphemes you're going to be teaching. And that's, again, why these are in there. Are there any questions? I'm going to show some examples, but please, and I meant to say, I mean, I know that Stacey and Dr. Friesen have, interjected, but if anybody else has questions, I see the chat has things, and I guess I know Karen's meaning that, but just let me know. Please stop me at any time. So going back to the UFLA scope and sequence, what I did for a visual is I took the UFLA scope and sequence and I took our sound wall and I built the sound wall for kindergarten, first and second grade. So you're going to see pictures here about the end of kindergarten. Again, take UFLA out, but just like take your scope and sequence for your units or your lessons. This is at the end of kindergarten. If I am using UFLA, this is what my vowel valley will look like. So these are the only sounds that I would have explicitly taught in kindergarten. Okay, so as I said earlier, in kindergarten, you're going to have gaps. And you see the gaps here. You don't have schwa in the middle. You don't have R control. You don't have the diphthongs. You don't have all of the long vowels. So this is, again, using UFLA. This is at the end of kindergarten, all the consonants I would have explicitly taught. So obviously consonant heavy, you're teaching more consonants than you are vowels. So in kindergarten, you have explicitly taught and you've taught that initial sound for almost all the consonants. So you see that the mouth position for almost all the consonants has been added. And then as we go into first grade, which I know this doesn't apply to y'all because you're kindergarten, but I just want you to see this like progression. I think it's important to see the progression. So at the end of first grade, this is what the vowel valley will look like. So if you, like me, have the OCD and you need to get some fulfillment, go up to first grade. At the end of first grade, you can see a complete vowel valley. So as you see on here, especially under schwa, where I had to use the dry erase cards, because as I said earlier, the only component for schwa, which you're not going to be teaching, but just as an example, the only component in there is that banana, so those cards. And you can see in several of these where I had to add a word on the dry erase cards that was not included with the sound. So this is at the end of first grade using that scope, what the vowel valley would look like. Again, I use trifold science boards. You can see that. I have the Velcro dots. You can see that on here. And also you can see from the end of kindergarten to first grade, just you're adding more, the graphemes have been added, especially to the consonant chart, because you did that initial instruction of the manner of articulation and that initial sound in kindergarten. And then at the end of second grade, you have completed, because UFLA is intended for K2. So for tier 1, it would be, you would have taught all 128 sounds or all 128 lessons in UFLA. And so your vowel valley would be complete. So at this point, everything in your bag should be used, but some things still won't be used because we're supplemental, right? So there may be some things that we have that you don't use, and that's what the need for the dry erase cards. And so just because you've completed the scope and sequence doesn't mean your bag will be completely empty. For the most part, it will be. And then this is the consonant chart at the end of second grade. So at the end of second grade, as you see here, you have all the consonants. You've added all the parts of the sound wall. And then the locks. Again, as I said, this is not my style because I'm not cutesy, but this is right up your alley. I know in kindergarten, y'all are so cute and I love seeing everything y'all do. It's just not my style and I'm jealous because I wish I could do this kind of stuff, but I just used sticky notes. And so as you see here, also this is on a bulletin board. So if you have a lot of bulletin board space, obviously this works perfectly. Our cards are smaller, and when you see our sound wall, you will see that. So that's why the science board works well, because you can move it around the classroom. It's very transient as far as, if you want to pull it circle time or if you want to pull it small groups. And our cards are, small enough that even on this bulletin board this size, you could have both constant chart and the vowel valley. Just depending on the size of your bulletin board. But the locks, unlocking the sound, I'm sure y'all are gonna have a cute little routine. I know a lot of people do like a wand, a wizard, where they, I'm sure that y'all already have something in the making for the exact way y'all are gonna unlock these. But Dr. Friesen did want this included because she said this was definitely.
You are a sticky note person where you just want to cover it up and you want to have your sound wall just like already up and then just take off when you need to. That is perfectly fine as well. You will just see a little unlock icon. So we wanted to give you that idea that like we are unlocking those sounds, but it's kind of like in the old where we had animated literacy, we would cover it up with the colored letter once it was taught. This is where we're now releasing it and unlocking it for the kids once we've taught it. So it's what works for you, but it is nice that if you already have it all up, so that you don't have to worry about finding that card and putting it up, that you just have to take off the sticky note or you take off the lock. So either way is fine, but I think those are very cute ideas that I think will resonate with kids.
Yes. I was gonna say this is kind of like a good I know we have like 17 more minutes, but for those because we will be referring to the one of the lessons that's included in your Summer Academy course, Canvas. At this time, do you want to take like a minute to like open that up, look through that, like the front matter, because a lot of what we have discussed so far has been from that front, like there's a lot of front matter included in the teacher guide. So before we get, because the next part, we're going to be doing the steps to implementing the sounds on the sound wall. So maybe we can take 5 minutes, let you open that up and just look through the front matter and see if you have any questions. And then we can come back for discussion and then start here when we come back from the break. Dr. Friesen, how do you feel about that?
I think that's great. Also, are you hearing me okay? Or do I come off?
It's kind of staticky.
I don't know. Okay, let me try. Is that any better?
No.
Is that any better?
Yes.
That is?
Yes. Clear.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. I had someone reach out and I wasn't sure if it was just their device or is mine. So, okay. So real quick, yes, I think that's great. Just wanted to make sure you know in the Canvas course that you got for Summer Academy, you go down to the sound wall training and it should be linked in there. So please put in the chat if for some reason you can't find it. But what you have is kind of that first section of the guide and then a couple sample lessons. You will get the full guide before the start of the school year, but make sure to access that because we will be using it later on, and then you will get to see an actual full lesson towards the end too when we in the second half. So yeah.
I just saw something on the chat. I don't want it to get like embedded and not remember to speak on this. So I just there was a chat about like a file folder. So I do want it, because Dr. Friesen said, it's in the folder, like a printable one. So what I've done, so this is the one that you've seen in the presentation, and this is the one that Dr. Friesen has included in your folder. So this is just the printed, obviously, this is exposing everything, so your students would see sounds that they haven't learned. So obviously there's some cute ways you can handle that, and this is you could do some magic to it because it's in a PDF format. So you could make edits to this. But also what I want to say is I use this like in tutoring. I've laminated those. So I can, like, in the small group, it's another option. So with a dry erase marker, I can add words or add when I need to. So if you're thinking like, well, I could see, needing that in a small group setting, I don't want to take the cards down. These are some great alternatives to that. The laminating and also the file folder option. Just wanted to share that. But do you want to take, because I know time-wise, the break is, in like 12 minutes. Do you want to maybe take, maybe come back at 1:55 just for like 5 minutes and see if we have any discussion? Okay, so take the next like 7 minutes to open up that folder and look at the front matter specifically, obviously whatever you want to look at, but just the front matter, see if you have any questions. Because basically we've gone through a lot that's included in that front matter, and obviously we're here, so if you have any questions now, I'm not going anywhere. So if there's anything that has been discussed in the chat you think would be for the good of the group, please, we can do that now too. Dr. Friesen, is the folder on my learning plan? Angela asked. Oh. I just felt like that was like a natural place to stop right there.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then is the sound still working okay?
Oh, yeah, it's
on my
very
end?
clear. Yeah, I didn't know if it was your computer, because before it's been that way. So I was like, I didn't want to say anything because I thought it was just how you're like. I'm glad
Yeah.
thank you. I mean, I'm glad somebody, I probably.
Yeah, I couldn't tell. I wasn't sure, and my defaults to randomly. So if it happens, just be like, stop.
Yeah, it's good.
Luckily, I haven't had to say too much yet. So
That's good. Let's look back through the chat. So which school is the one that, have they already started the implementation? That first group? Okay. I'm sorry, Ramita.
Oh, you're fine. They aren't, so two of our schools started, but then Stacy used it during summer school to try it out.
Oh, okay, so she's
But
already,
the ones
okay,
that are currently teaching right now, and they have a work day, so they're kind of in PD day, so they're kind of in those trainings today. So they're not able to be on, but they were the ones that got the training back in June, like early June.
okay, well, I think she wants to speak on from using it, you know? Give any,
Yeah, and that's the lesson that
oh, that's right, yeah.
that's the lesson that I recorded too. So
okay,
yeah, so they're great, and Monica helped write the lessons too. So the two of them are kind of yeah, they'll chime in when
yeah.
they want to add on.
I know it's a few minutes. I want to say if y'all want to come back together, got about 7 minutes, and just any questions or any about the layout of the teacher guide or any information that you may have seen that you have questions about. And then if not, we'll see if Stacy wants to share anything from the writing side, or Monica, or the implementation side. I know you are going to have a chance to see Stacy in the model lesson at the end, but if y'all don't have any questions or anything, maybe this would be a good time for them to share out from those perspectives of the writing and implementation. Are there any questions? Anybody expect to see something and weren't able to find it, or is everybody good with the flow of the information, or any questions? If not, Stacey and Monica, if y'all don't mind just sharing, well, Stacey, you from the like implementation side, and then from the writing side, anything you think would be valuable for the group to know.
Yeah, and the implementation guide, just compared to animated literacy last year, as you all are looking through it, looks very different. The way that the reasoning behind that is, I know one of the things as a kindergarten teacher that I've just struggled with, and I've heard so many kindergartners say it, kindergarten teachers saying it over and over during letters training about, the kids are not absorbing the information of letter recognition and letter sound when we're teaching multiple letters a week, and then we need to have some sort of review piece in there. So that was kind of our direction with going through and adding those additional elements to the sound wall implementation. Of course, we wanted to keep those key components of having actions and having the sound, and then adding in the research behind using the mouth formations, and teaching the students those things. So we definitely started with the most important best practices in doing that. And then from there, last year, I actually began a review piece with my students and found huge success. So I shared that with the team through a lot of discussion and some fine tuning and tweaking. In fact, the implementation guide you see today is completely different than even the first one we turned in, just from practice. I taught summer school. Courtney Ravenscraft, also did summer school and implemented parts of the guide so that we could get immediate feedback and tweak as we went so that it would be ready to go for you this fall. And just even just within those few short days that we saw with our K-to-K students, we were already seeing success, and with them recognizing the letters and the sounds quicker, using those mirrors and getting their mouths formed. They're really just putting all of the elements together. It was really cool to watch. So, and you'll get to see that in the video. I didn't know I was going to get to see myself today, so this will be fun. Do you have anything
really
to
good.
add to that?
No, you really said it all. I mean, we started off just going and looking through the scope and sequence and how we can make it all fit, and then going through and trying to find actions that go with the sounds that the students are needing to make. And then we just went from there. I mean, it was a very tedious process, very thoughtful, and And it wasn't just a quick get it done. It was very intentional, thoughtful, long process to work through, and we feel pretty proud of the end
Mhm.
product, and we hope that the teachers will see a positive result in their students from this.
I would say one other thing to add is there are a lot of moving parts. And so procedures. If you don't get those procedures tight at the beginning, it's going to eat up a lot of time. I will say, as they get used to the procedure, it gets faster. I know one of the things that we hear the last several years is that we don't have enough time in reading foundations. We don't have enough time. I would suggest cut your Heggerty down to maybe 5 or 6 minutes. Research says we only need 5 to 6 minutes every day anyway. We don't need that 10 minutes that we have been implementing. And really just use those first couple of days to focus on getting those procedures in place for the sound wall implementation. And once you get that and you get that procedure down, the rest of it starts to happen a lot faster. The video I think you'll see today is actually the second video that Lisa came to take. The first video, the only thing I did was really introduce the sound and then do the review piece at the end. And today, I think you'll get to see the entire block of, I don't think you'll see the Heggerty piece, but the sound wall lesson, you'll get to see the entire piece, and it did fit all within our time block. So it is possible. You just have to be really tight and really intentional with your time.
And you could also use your guided reading time too during the beginning, because students are still learning their letters and sounds and procedures, that you can use that time too at the beginning.
Absolutely, especially like after you've taught the handwriting piece of it, which is at the very end of the lesson, then I would teach that formation, but then they had to write the letter later in the day because there wasn't time during that block. So anyway, I don't know if anybody has any questions about that, or if we'll just wait and see later once they see the lesson and we go through each of the components. Maybe questions will pop up, but.
No, thank y'all. Yeah, this process I forgot when this all started. It's definitely, I can't remember the month. But yeah,
It started back in, beginning of the year, maybe in January. There was snow on the ground. I know that.
okay.
Yeah.
And then we started really having conversations like before spring break, and then hit the ground running with kind of crafting some lessons, and that the team has been hard at work to get it ready for our extended year that already started, and then to be ready for August as well.
Well, thank y'all.
I don't think there was a day between probably maybe a week ago and March that we did not have our hands on this document, working and tweaking and making it the best that we can, not only for our students, but for teachers. We just wanted it to be simple and easy to roll out. So, and you are welcome. So I hope that you all love it as much as we do. We are very proud.
Of it.
We're really hoping, that you all provide feedback to Lisa throughout the year as to how it's going with you. And we just are really excited and are really anxious and hope that you all have the same experiences in your classroom and get to see the same results that I know that I've seen, not only last year when I did it with my own classroom, but just within the few weeks that I had my K-to-K kids in summer school. So.
Well, thank y'all for sharing that. Yeah, I think this is our break time, so just everything just happened naturally today. So we'll stop right now. I know it's like a 15-minute break, so I'll stop recording, and then we will be back at 2:15 your time. But I'll be on here. I'm not going anywhere. Michael, he's on here now. So if there's any questions, please, but I am going to stop recording.